What's good, everyone? This is your main correspondent, Alan Taylor, and I'm back in the broadcast room. And what I have for you today is the CNN's report on the Manosphere. Now, of course, here on YouTube, we know about it. Obviously, it's been going mainstream the past couple of years, definitely since Kevin Samuels kind of made it mainstream. Let's just make this the truth. He kind of did that. So now that it's here, and mainstream news is reporting on this situation about the Manosphere, and we're going to see what they had to say in the angles and the ways that they try to make sure that all men look like misogynists. So here we go.
CNN's Donnie O'Sullivan got in the cage with former UFC star turned podcaster Jake Shields to explore the Manosphere and why exactly it's so popular.
They speak liberal, they have liberal friends, and then they go online and they are a white supremacist.
This is Vera Papasova. She spent the last year dating far-right men in New York City for a story for Cosmopolitan magazine.
They're the most insecure men I've ever sat down with. It was really difficult to have some of these dates because they were so insecure, because they don't really know who they are and they don't know how to figure that out.
She said the men she dated got all their news and information from the so-called Manosphere.
They did not listen to anything else. They're only listening to independent media, and they're only listening to men talking to men.
The Manosphere is made up of macho podcasters and influencers.
There's no such thing as an independent female.
Most women have zero concept of like money.
Females don't have independent thought.
It's a space where UFC fighters are among those who reign supreme.
They love the UFC guys. They love the MMA guys because those guys do what they can.
Now, before she goes any further, of course, they threw up, Andrew Tate and Myron Gaines and things like that. And, they threw up what I would consider the viral moments of what they would, what they're saying. Well, not women don't have independent thoughts, stuff like that. You didn't actually finish listening to the whole, talking point of what the two gentlemen had to say, period. But this is where we at. And this is how they are angling things and trying to make sure that it's making us all look bad, because basically what they're trying to angle this is that, the men that engage in this type of content or, information that, we happen to be all misogynists and we hate women and things like that. And of course, this is farther from the truth. But see, the problem is it's not a deep dive off into the actual aspect of the situation with the Manosphere. Let's keep going here.
Modern gladiators, they're badass.
Badass like Jake Shields, a former UFC star turned podcaster.
All right. Now I'm starting to feel nervous. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Who I met at an MMA gym in Las Vegas.
Like all great MMA pros. I've never hit anyone in my life.
I'm not punching back. Hit me.
KO. This is CNN. Do you miss being full-time pro? Like in terms of,
Of course I miss it. To go from professional athlete, which is the highest of highs, to retirement.
And I guess the
podcast has helped. You could fall into depression if you just go from the most amazing career where you're famous and spotlights to all of a sudden you're a nobody.
Sure.
Like other podcasters in the Manosphere, Jake regularly hosts controversial guests.
And I named the podcast Fighting Back. I feel like we have to fight back what we're told we're allowed to do. I just don't like to be told you're not allowed to talk to this person. Like, why can't I talk to him? I'm not saying I agree with his ideology, but I should hear what he has to say.
He's hosted the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Today I have a very, very special guest, Dr. David Duke. I know you're controversial, but I had no idea how controversial.
And Thomas Russo, the leader of the white supremacist group Patriot Front.
Let's go where we disagree a little bit.
Yes, sure.
Let's hit race, because you're a white-only group?
So the organization only allows people of American ethnicity, and all Americans, I believe, come from Europe, so they're white.
The true heirs of the American spirit fight on!
Yeah, no, I understand and talk to these guys, but I've also not brought anyone hateful. If I do, I'm going to be really on top of them.
But so you saying that you haven't brought someone hateful on, right? People say, well, you brought on the Grand Wizard of the KKK, you brought on Patriot Front.
Yeah.
They're hateful.
No, I think those are excellent questions, but if people go and watch the actual interviews, I think they would be like, oh, this guy's not near as hateful as if I expect it.
But
now, to take Jake Shields' point of, and I'm going to apply that to the Manosphere situation. The point that he's trying to say is like, okay, I talked to these guys, things like that, to hear their side, their point of view. He's like, I don't necessarily agree with them, but I want to hear what they had to say. Now, see, this is the issue with the Manosphere. They're not actually hearing what we have to say as a whole. They're not actually listening to what the Manosphere is saying as a whole. They're not diving off into the different layers of what it is. They're taking points and stuff like that and trying to present it in this certain type of light right here. Like it's just full of hate and griminess and destruction. And no, this is not it. You know what I'm saying? Since I've been introduced to the Manosphere, you know what I'm saying, years ago, of course, I've learned a tremendous amount of information, got in touch with, a few people throughout, doing lives on YouTube and things like that, talking about situations and scenarios and things like that, and learning information from, other men that, have done the same things that I've done or seen the same things that I've seen, and hearing different point of views and different, ways to handle situations and not to handle situations. And, it's a whole thing, not the whole. I mean, of course there's segments to it. There's sides to the Manosphere that ought not need to be in there, but, there's just like there's sides to feminism that shouldn't be in there as well, and just to, angle it just one way, you're not getting the full perspective of what the whole situation is about,
Vera says hate isn't what the men she dated were really looking for.
One of these guys brought me to a political meeting.
And did they talk about politics?
Barely. They talked about, it was a bunch of men complaining about girlfriends and wives, regurgitating Andrew Tate type of advice about how to train your girlfriend, how to train your wife to be submissive. And so this group was supposed to be a political group, but they're talking about relationship problems. And the fact that that's what most of the time was spent on, you don't need to be a neo-Nazi. You need therapy.
A neo-Nazi. And for men to get together and talk about, and, in the Manosphere space, we talk about relationships as well. That's a part of life. That's a huge factor on this planet. That's the whole reason why God created us, is to pair up and multiply, be fruitful and multiply. Y'all remember that talking point? So relationships are a huge factor of not only the politics in this world, the religious base in this world. It's a part of our lives as beings on this planet. And, she's sitting around, well, most of the time men talk about relationships, because nowadays that's one of our hugest problems. Politics, yeah, too, but that's one of our hugest problems, definitely in this country, is that our marriage rates are declining, birth rates are declining. We as a whole society, and both men and women, we're not seeming to get along good enough in order to keep building families and having true good structure in this country, which is, this is what this country was founded on, and it's been prosperous up until now. All of a sudden, nobody wants to do things the way that it's been going in order to keep things being prosperous. So yeah, it's a huge part of the situation. So yeah, men, we talking about this, what I'm saying? Now that we have, our mics and things like that, yeah, we talk about these things. And, a lot of people, they're not used to men talking. For decades now, men, we only had spaces to go to, like the bars and lounges and things like that after work, go chill with the fellas. And men were talking about relationships then. It's just that the women weren't there up until, recently, when women started to go to the bars and the stuff like that. And then it turned into the nightclubs and all this other type of stuff. And, men can't go to these places now and just chill out and talk and things like that and hash out each other's problems and try to help each other solve the problems, because the women are there. And I'm sorry, but this is just the truth. When women are around, it's only so much that we're going to talk about. Now, she happened to be invited to this situation here with the gentleman that she was with. And at that point in time, I'm thinking that she may have been the only, not the only woman there, but it was not enough women there for men to just be like, we're not going to talk, period, about what we were talking about. So yeah, she overheard how men talk. And 9 times out of 10, of course, she ain't going to like it.
The appeal of Jake's podcast speaks to a need among young men in this country that Vera says can't be ignored.
You have to incentivize someone to want to be better. You can't just say, let's make men better. The thing about these guys is their biggest support system is online, but that also is very isolating, and isolation is what breeds hatred.
Groups like Patriot Front offer community, but community based on racism and hate.
People have to really think about, do you have the capacity to talk to people that you don't agree with? Because
I mean, I can't stand this one-sided angle, because this is not the only online groups that young men can go to. There are very good positive online groups, very good positive men online to talk to and ask questions to, you know what I'm saying, within the manosphere, if you want to keep it there, because this is what we're talking about. So I mean, Jesus Christ, man, this one-sided angle to try to upnerve, to try to, rouse the people and things like that, to, see, oh, just the manosphere, just all bad. It's all bad. Man, come on, man. I can't stand this stuff. I can't stand the one-sidedness. It's pissing me off.
that one nice conversation you might have might change someone's day enough to not have to seek out help in an online support group, which is actually a bunch of white supremacists using political beliefs as an excuse for how they feel.
Donnie O'Sullivan is here with us now. Donnie, I'm so glad you've done this special. There's so much intrigue around this issue of the Manosphere. And in fact, Trump is going to the UFC tonight. How big of a role does the sport play in the Manosphere?
Hey, Isabel. Yeah, and look, we should point out at the start here, there's tons of guys who are fans, and some women as well, who are fans of the UFC. I have many friends who are fans of the UFC. It certainly does not mean, that if you are a fan of the UFC, you are falling sort of down this rabbit hole of hate and white supremacy and everything else. But what we are seeing,
I didn't understand the tie that they was trying to make between the UFC and the Manosphere. What is it? Like the UFC is it's a whole sport. Like, basically, like how are they trying to tie the UFC to the Manosphere and the way that men are talking online and stuff like that? Come on, man. They was just doing too much with this. This was just too much rhetoric, too much talking out of the side of the neck.
seeing is that there is this sort of there is this crossover. The UFC is playing a greater and bigger role really in American life. Joe Rogan, who's the world's biggest podcaster, is a UFC commentator. Dana White, who is the founder of the UFC, is a prominent Trump supporter and was recently appointed to the board of Meta by Mark Zuckerberg himself, another big MMA and UFC fan. And actually fighting tonight in Miami. Trump is going to the event. We're not sure if he'll be there for the earlier fights, but fighting tonight in Miami at the UFC event is a fighter by the name of Bryce Mitchell, who recently set up a podcast of his own. And on his debut episode a few months ago, he said that Hitler was a quote unquote good guy or a great guy. Dana White, the head of the UFC, was quick to condemn that. But, you can just kind of see there where folks who might be coming into this sport for one reason are fan of fighting, and then they're getting exposed to views like Bryce Mitchell's.
Okay. So, I mean, like I say, it's good and bad in every situation. It's good and bad in the quote unquote manosphere. It's good and bad in feminism. So, in people do have their own views and the way that they want to live life, the Patriot Front situation, which they're trying to present and stuff like that. I mean, to be honest with you, though, they didn't really show any type of positive side to the manosphere in here. They just showed, especially, Myron and Tate, they showed only those type of angles and stuff like that. And I've listened to Myron and Tate. They do have positive things to say, too. They just not all doom and gloom and super negative people. And then the Patriot for all the other stuff, man, it's just, to me, it was just all negative. They didn't try to reach to see anything positive within the manosphere, stuff like that. And I know personally, Like I say, I've been, engaged with, Manosphere for years now. I know that there are plenty of positive angles to us as men. When we get online, we talk and we try to help each other out with our problems and things like that. It's crazy to me that they only want to, show one side in the propaganda and stuff like that. But this is how they want to roll. And try to make sure that, our voices don't rise to the top, but it's no way of shutting this down now. Men, we have the microphone, which we, have never had. And, they kicked us out of our own spaces, our bars and stuff like that years ago, where we had our own spaces where we could talk amongst each other. And, they wanted women to come in, and women want to come in and, hang out and all that type of stuff. And so, we lost our own spaces to where we can talk and solve each other's problems. But it is what it is, though. Shout out to all my subscribers. Mad love to y'all. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like, share, subscribe button. Make sure you ring that bell to be notified whenever I decide to post things. And like I always say,
and that, my friends, is the bottom line.
That, my friends, is the bottom line.